obviously you were supporting the occupiers there at the Wildlife Refuge in Oregon. And kind of what sparked you to go to Portland? Was it an initiative you took on your own? Was it something that they reached out to you and asked for your assistance?
So I belong to a coalition of Western states. So our acronym is COWS, COWS. What COWS does, essentially, is we look for bad government, bad laws, and as legislators, we look to implement legislation through our sessions. We were meeting in Portland. We were also going to meet with Ammon Bundy's attorney, Mike Arnold, and then start meeting with all of the other attorneys to look at what the charges are coming down on the political prisoners.
What kind of, when you look at this group and you look at what they were doing, what their goals were, what kind of drove you to support them and stand by them?
So when the federal government feels like they're going to govern by gunpoint Americans, I'm sorry. Government is going to point a gun at me, Chris. I'm going to point my gun right back. If you're going to shoot me, I'm going to shoot you back. I ain't going to shoot first, but I ain't going to sit there and let you just shoot me. Okay? Just not going to happen. I don't think most Americans are going to do that.
To what extent would you go to support somebody who's pointing arms at the federal government or somebody who's taking over a wildlife refuge?
You're talking about a bunch of cowboys going in the middle of nowhere, making campfires, and people coming and going, the press camping out there, citizens camping out there, the police, the FBI going in and out of this refuge that people say that they took over. Meanwhile, it was abandoned. No one was there. So they basically kind of said, this is a great place to camp and make our statement. There was never a standoff. There wasn't one cowboy out there that ever pointed a firearm at an agent or a law enforcer. And the saddest thing is it's all on video. When you have Lavoy Finicum exiting his truck with his hands up and he gets gunned down, period.
When you look at kind of the idea of taking over the wildlife refuge in the first place, I mean, is that okay? Are these citizens abiding by the law? Should they be doing something like that?
Okay, Chris, we're going to go back to taking over the refuge. They camped at the refuge, did not take it over. If they were to take it over, then they would have rejected folks from coming and going. They did not do that. They invited you and everyone else in America to come there. No one, no federal employee, no federal law enforcement, no federal government guy came to the refuge and said, I got to go to work because I work at the refuge. Mm-hmm. Nope. No one did that. So they didn't take over the refuge. They were camping at the refuge.
Occupying it.
Like President Obama's occupying our White House? Same thing?
So if people were camping at the White House, if people were camping at the Capitol building, would that be okay too?
Well, there's some gates. I don't think they're getting in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're not, and there are people that camp out actually at the park right outside the gates.
Right.
I've actually seen them.
Yeah.
And they're camping out. They're sleeping on the benches. So I guess it's okay. They're not getting arrested, are they? But however, I mean, if you look at our situation today, Chris, we have this administration releasing terrorists from Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and I lived on Guantanamo Bay for 18 months. We have our administration releasing terrorists and arresting and killing ranchers. So what I'd say is, Houston, we have a big problem.
How about maybe more accessible places? People were camping out in a post office, other federal facilities that maybe are more accessible than the White House or Capitol building. Is there anywhere that...
So here's the real question. Here's your real question, Chris, with this refuge and who owns it. So once upon a time, that bird sanctuary refuge was all privately owned by ranchers. So if the federal government, which is only supposed to have forts and ports, claim that they own it, I need, again, paperwork where the federal government purchased that land through the legislature. Like, how do we do a peaceful protest, a peaceful assemble, without getting shot. I mean, you have to look at the history. And I don't care what anyone believes about Waco. Waco, that was private property that Janet Reno sent in basically to do a total slaughter of Waco. Then we look at Ruby Ridge. That was wrong again. So at what point do Americans stand up for Americans? Because that's what Ammon and Ryan Bundy were doing. They knew what was happening to the Hammonds was wrong. They went there to defend them, to protect them from the bully. And at the time, the bully was our federal government.
Does the kind of the ideologies of these folks, some of the other ideologies that they have ever deter you, or does that ever, should that matter in this case? Like, for example, when David Fry makes a Facebook post that says hashtag pray for ISIS, or there's a gentleman, Richard Mack, at the Bundy standoff, a former Arizona sheriff, who says he's going to put women at the front of the line so they're shot first. Does that stuff, does that deter you at all?
First of all, just to disclose, I've not seen the hashtag of David Fry's, nor have I heard Richard Mack's statement. I'm not saying that he didn't state it. I'm just saying I've not heard that. And I think after visiting with David Fry and kind of learning about his background on his beliefs religiously, you know, when he said pray for that radical group, you know, I don't know what would help that radical group. Personally, I think, well, I've already stated publicly how I feel about terrorists. So, but I have to give it to David Fry for being empathetic to actually want to pray for a radical group, to maybe something better would come out of it. Because as you look at ISIS and whom is enrolling themselves in ISIS, you're looking at a lot of street people, people with no families, people that have been abused, people that are not educated enough to make great decisions. And then all of a sudden you have this group saying, come with me, you know, we're your new family, I love you. And so all of a sudden they feel a sense of belonging, and they allow themselves to be brainwashed into a radical movement. And so, you know, good for David Fry that he's praying for our enemies, because I don't think I'm going to pray for my enemies. I think if my enemies are going to confront me, I just want to get rid of them.
If you had known about that beforehand, would that have changed how you approach the situation, or is it something beyond that?
So if there's a sentence by Richard Mack that makes no sense, then I would say, what's the substance? What's the actual substance behind that sentence? And so I get down to the truth of the matter. And then once you figure out the truth, then you can move forth.
When you and I spoke on the phone, you mentioned you support people, you support Nevadans, mm-hmm. and it sounded like it was pretty wide-ranging. I think you made a comment about that you would have supported Black Lives Matter, you would have supported...
Well, yeah, so I think as Americans, once we all come together, not just Black Lives Matter, cops' lives matter, Native Americans' lives matter, ranchers' lives matter. So once we figure out to stop being divided by design, and we come together as a whole group, that might send a very loud and crystal clear message to the federal government and our elected officials that the power of the vote and the power of the people definitely will come to fruition.
If it was Black Lives Matter, if it was a Muslim group of Muslims that were occupying there in Burns, would you have shown the same empathy? Would you have been as happy to help?
If they said, I want to talk to Assemblywoman Michele Fiore, I will return the phone call. So that's what happened. So I will tell you that I will never turn my back on someone that wants help. And if they're wrong, then I'm going to say, dude, you're wrong, but let's stay alive and figure it out. If they're right, then I'll be their biggest advocate.
Is there anything else with regards to the camping at Burns, in Burns, that you'd like to add, or something that maybe the average person doesn't know that should know?
Sure. There's actually a lot. This is definitely political. This is very, very political. I say that because, again, we're releasing terrorists and we're arresting ranchers and shooting ranchers unarmed. It's amazing. So this is a political statement. And one of the things someone had asked me, a peer of mine said, when you were at the refuge, weren't you scared? And I'm like, no, I don't think the FBI is going to shoot me, and I definitely know my American patriots aren't going to shoot me, so what's there to be scared about?
Your opponent in Congressional District 3, Jesse Spey, called the folks in Oregon domestic terrorists. Would it be possible to define that? Or first of all, do you agree with what Jesse Spey said, and if not?
First of all, I've never even heard his name till you mentioned it.
Okay.
So I don't know this existence of this person. Secondly, I think that when a fellow American wants to start name calling, I would question his integrity, because obviously he doesn't know his ass from his elbow. And it disturbs me that a candidate, without finding out the information and doing their due diligence and actually getting off the couch and going to Burns and meeting these people, would have such an opinion. So I highly suggest, if people want to open their pie hole, they should actually take the time to do their research, spend their own dollar, spend their own time, and meet folks before they start calling them names.
I guess what defines terrorism? So something that terrifies somebody.
Okay, so here's terrorism.
Okay.
San Bernardino.
Okay.
That was a truly terrorist act. 9/11. That's a truly terrorist act. Our government governing by gunpoint in Bunkerville, that's borderline terrorism. You're going to point a gun at me because I owe you $1 for my cows eating sage grass? Are you insane? That's terrorism. When we have folks like Harry Reid okaying the BLM to go out there and point guns at Americans, that's terrorism. When we have a president who releases terrorists from our military base in Cuba out to the world, that's terrorism. When you have an administration that's allowing refugees in our country without vetting them and then they go kill people, that's terrorism. So there's a lot of terrorism going on, and I just want to make sure that folks understand that Americans are not terrorists.
No Americans.
Some of them, if they choose to be.
The Hammonds, they said maybe they weren't completely in support of this. In fact, I think they came out saying that they didn't support the camping, the occupation at the wildlife refuge. Does that kind of defeat the purpose for the people that were there?
If, God forbid, Dwight or Stephen Hammond even said, thank you for standing up for me, they could have easily gotten another 5 years. So when you're beat down and suppressed as much as the Hammond family has been, I think that they're very fearful. And I think that they took a move literally thinking it as to they don't want to touch this anymore because they've lost everything. And hopefully when they get out in 5 years, they can rebuild. So in my opinion, I think that they are laying as low as they can to not be even crucified more than what they've already been.
Really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and answer all those questions.
You're welcome. It was fun to be here.
It's great to have you.